And welcome to another edition of Is This a Great Game or What? I'm Jeff Kurkjian, and before we send you to the episode, a couple of notes here. This is the audio and video from our live event to benefit Michael Brown, a friend of ours who has ALS, a father of three. We did a charity event in Pottstown, Pennsylvania at Soul Joel's, the Sunnybrook Ballroom, in order to raise money for him and his family. We had quite a few members of the family come out, that of which you'll hear questions from live. And I just want to make a note, too. This was recorded in a ballroom. The audio is going to sound a little bit different than what you're normally hearing here on the podcast. The video is going to definitely look a lot different from what you're used to, so apologies for that. But in a live event, in a live environment, a lot of things are different. But trust me, you have never heard Tim and Jeff Kurkjian quite like this. Is This a Great Game or What? A live episode. You can hear it right now. Before we begin our program today, I just think we all need to give a big round of applause to our honored, amazing guest. Michael Brown is here. Thank you so much. Michael, thank you for being here. To his family, to his friends, baseball fans, country music fans, whoever it is, all of you being here today puts you in line for what is going to be a really awesome afternoon to raise money for Michael Brown. I also want to introduce Hall of Fame baseball writer, my father, my podcast co-host, my best friend, Tim Kurkjian, everybody, here on stage.
Thank you, Jeff. I found out earlier today that Frank Sinatra actually performed on this stage. So the greatest adult male singer of all time and the worst adult male singer, me, have now appeared on the same stage. And Jeffrey, by the way, can really sing. He sang the national anthem and God Bless America at Progressive Field in front of all those people. And his poor dad can't sing at all. And his sister and his mother are like the greatest artists I've ever seen. And I am the worst artist of all time. My mother used to hang my artwork on the inside of the refrigerator. So,
Dad, I mean, it's funny when you hear it the first time. When you've heard it 30 times, especially since starting the podcast.
Every Tuesday, we have an interview on our podcast. Last week, we had Jason Stark, Hall of Famer, absolute legendary baseball writer in Philadelphia. And this Tuesday, our guests on the show are all of you, because we're going to open this up to questions soon into the program, so you can ask any question that you want, and this will run as our podcast on Tuesday. As far as I go, you can ask me anything you like, but it has to be about baseball or basketball or sitcoms from the 60s, because I don't know about anything else. But please, raise your hand when the time comes. We'll do our best to answer anything that you have.
Yeah, so Joel's going to be walking around with a microphone when we open it up. Please feel free to, wave him down. There's Joel. Thank you, Joel. I gave you a big love a little bit earlier, and we didn't see you earlier. Probably putting out a fire, as you always do. So, Dad, let's talk, before we jump into baseball, Michael Brown and your relationship with him and how this came about. My uncle, my dad's brother, passed away from ALS in 2023. My dad and him were born in the same year, 1956, January and December of the same year. Went to school the same year, every single year. I'm guessing because Nana, his mom, was like, okay, let's just get them, both go. Just go to kindergarten. My dad, believe it or not, was smaller than he is now and was entering kindergarten at age 4. And you went to school every year with your brother, Uncle Matt, 2 streets down from me. His kids grew up. We were like brother and sister with them, and he passed away in 2023. And that led us into this ALS community, which has been devastating, but the most rewarding people are in this community today. And if you are entering the ALS community today, this is your first ALS event of any sort, welcome, because you are welcomed into us. And we want to give a big, big shout out and thank you for coming and supporting.
Jeff is 5'6.5", and he's given me a hard time about being short. You've got to be kidding me. All right, well, I've known Michael Brown for several years now, and our connection, of course, sadly is through ALS, but it's also through family, and it's also through baseball, of course. And I've been texting with Michael for years now, and occasionally I'll get a text in the middle of the night from him. And one of them he wrote was, in 1974, Nolan Ryan pitched a 13-inning complete game, struck out 19 batters, threw 235 pitches, and then 3 days later pitched a shutout against the Yankees. It's Michael Brown pointing out how much the game has changed today and how much some of the old guys like me wish we could go back to the days of Steve Carlton and Mike Schmidt and so many others. Michael sent me another text, also very late at night once, that some guy named Red Barrett for the 1944 Boston Braves pitched a complete game and threw 58 pitches. We have guys who throw 58 pitches in an inning now. I mean, that's the way our game has worked. But that beautiful connection to baseball is what has connected Michael and I. And he sent me a picture of when it was the second to the last high school game in which he was coaching. And his high school team did a whiteout just for Michael Brown. And the entire team wore white jerseys with number 4 and Brown written on the back. And it was the most inspiring thing that I've seen in a long time, that a team would do that for our friend Michael Brown. And speaking of teams with Michael Brown, these knuckleheads at the main table here, most of whom are close to my age, all go to fantasy camp with the Phillies every year. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the championship team from the 2026 Phillies fantasy camp, and the manager of that team was Michael Brown. So this is what we share, Michael and I. We share for an unbiding love of this beautiful game. And I think I met everybody in this room today at one point, and every single one of you here is for the same reason. We're here to help Michael Brown, but we're also here because we love this beautiful game, and it's going to remain the greatest game ever. And today we're going to talk about baseball or whatever you want to talk about, and you can, and again, we're going to get to the question and answer point pretty soon. All you have to do is raise your hand. You'll get a microphone. Ask us whatever you want.
And speaking of, having microphones, if we had a full circle moment with actually somebody who is a guest here today who came to support Michael Brown. I had the chance to go to spring training. Who's been to spring training, by the way? It is the coolest. If you haven't been to, oh my gosh, the Phillies do it better than anybody. It is so fun. Went down there, and John Brazier, longtime member of the Phillies team, brought some alumni, and he brought Dickie Knowles, who is here today. Dickie Knowles is here today, former Philadelphia Phillies. And here's the beauty of it. So he brings Dickie Knowles. Now, I'm a country music morning show host. I grew up with stories of baseball and Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and all these great stories from my dad. But I'm not my dad. So I call him the night before. I say, Dad, here are the alumni I have. Help me out a little bit here with some questions. Because if I got Luke Combs, I'm good. But if I got Dickie Knowles, I need a little help. So he looks at me and he goes, Jeff, almost 40 years ago to the day, so this, I believe, was 2024, I, meaning my dad, interviewed Dickie Knowles at spring training. And now here I am 40 years later interviewing Dickie Knowles at spring training. How crazy is that?
And Dickie Knowles is as old as I am, and he looks 10 times better than me. I do not understand this. Those were the days, early 80s, covering baseball. I could tell you a million different stories. That Ranger team that I covered, 1982, I'm like 12 years old. I'm 4 feet tall, and Mickey Rivers, the center fielder for the Texas Rangers, who I had met 3 weeks earlier and who makes $450,000 a year, Mickey came up to me and said, "Tim, can you loan me $2,000?" And I said, "Mickey, I make $11,000 a year. I don't have $2,000 to my name." But this is how baseball used to operate, and I'll never forget Dickie Knowles. I'll never forget those early Rangers and those early Oriole teams that I've covered. It was the best experience for a young guy to travel all over the country and meet people like this.
Bella, where? I don't know where Bella is, but I know how to take care of my pup.
Kratz, while you find Bella, today's episode is sponsored by the ASPCA Pet Health Insurance Program. The ASPCA Pet Health Insurance Program offers customizable accident and illness plans that can fit your budget, your lifestyle, and even your pet's particular quirks. Because let's be honest, vet bills can add up fast. And when it's time to submit a claim, it's easy. Just use their app and receive reimbursement for eligible vet bills directly into your bank account so you can get back to focusing on what really matters, your pet. To explore coverage, visit aspcapetinsurance.com/FOUL. That's aspcapetinsurance.com/FOUL. This is a paid advertisement. Insurance is underwritten by either Independence American Insurance Company or United States Fire Insurance Company and produced by PTZ Insurance Agency Limited. The ASPCA is not an insurer and is not engaged in the business of insurance.
You did mention those Orioles teams, and on the podcast this past September, it was the 30th anniversary of Cal Ripken Jr. breaking Lou Gehrig's record of consecutive games, right? And it was on September the 6th of 1995 when that happened. Dad and I are on the podcast, and we do On This Date in Baseball History, and we're saying 30 years ago, a record that will never be broken again happened on this day. And I look at my dad through the camera and I say, "Oh my gosh. Today is my wife's 30th birthday. She was born on the day that Cal Ripken Jr. broke that record, and it took us 3 seasons of the podcast to figure that out." Here we are, the historian of baseball and the husband of Emily Kurkjian, who was born on that date, and it took us that long to figure it out, Dad. Not our greatest move, by the way.
Well, you blew that one, Jeff, and I didn't help either. All right, I'm going to be terribly self-serving here and tell you a quick Cal Ripken story. This is back in the day when this was allowed. I ended up playing basketball with Cal Ripken a lot of times, and it was a raging conflict of interest. I never should have done it, but I had so much fun doing it, I kept doing it. But there's a point here. He's the most competitive person I have ever met in my entire life. Whatever the game is, he has to play it and he has to win it. So if we were on different teams in this ridiculously tiny pickup game, he used to like to pick me up at the end line. And he would guard me all the way down the court, just like that. He's 100 pounds more than I am. He's a foot taller more than me. And he just wanted to see if he could stay in front of the dinky little sports writer from getting down the court. That's who Cal Ripken is. That's who all the great players are in the major leagues. Their competitive nature is like nothing we've ever seen. And Emily, I'm so sorry. We forgot your birthday. When is it again?
Now, Dad, you talk about basketball, and, you know, if you listen to our podcast, we talk about baseball, but basketball sure does come up a lot. And Cal Ripken Jr. isn't the only one you would play basketball with. You played basketball with perhaps one of the most famous pickup players of all time, one Adam Sandler. How did that come about?
All right, on Halloween Day of 2001, I go to the Reebok Club in Upper West Side, New York, with my friend Steve Rushin, the greatest writer in the history of writers. And we're in this gym, we're just shooting around, the two of us, and we're just about ready to leave, and these two guys walk in and say, you want to play 2-on-2? And one of them was Adam Sandler. And he's wearing shoes that like have paint marks all over him. Like he's just painted a house. He's got a pair of sweatpants on that have holes in them. And we play 2-on-2, and Steve Rushin could really play. So we just killed Adam Sandler and this guy who might be the worst player I've ever seen. But afterwards, I call home, and Jeffrey's like 8 years old and 7 years old, and Kelly's 9 years old. And I said, you're not going to believe what happened to me today. And they said, what? Did you talk to Derek Jeter again? And I said, no, I played basketball with Happy Gilmore today. It was unbelievable. So, and I went back to the compound that day at Yankee Stadium, and I told everyone, I met Adam Sandler today. I played basketball with him. It was incredible. And then he came on the show that night. So there's no telling who you might run into when you go play basketball somewhere.
Well, and Dad brings up a good point. You know, when you grow up the son or daughter of Tim Kurkjian, you hear a lot of great stories. Players he met, players he interviewed, but it was the people who were not the players that would surprise us. Like the boy band you met in an elevator at an All-Star game. Do you remember this?
No, I was on an airplane.
Oh.
Right. And Nickelback was on the airplane. And they were all sitting in first class. And miraculously, I'm sitting in first class. So somehow I get in a conversation with these guys. And I say, where are you going or whatever? And they say, well, we're going to do this, whatever. I said, who are you guys? And they said, well, we're Nickelback. And I had to ask, what does that mean? Who is? I didn't even know what it was. I mean, I'm not very good at music. I really don't understand. And here, Jeffrey is in the music business, and there are a lot of things that I've just never figured out about the music business.
Yeah, when I got hired for my first country radio gig, it was in Las Vegas, where I spent 5 years doing country radio out there, and I had to politely tell my dad, it's not country western radio anymore, Dad. He kept saying, you're working for my son. He works for a country western show. And I'm like, Dad, this is not the hillbilly hour, okay? It's country music. It's a little bit different than what you're thinking. And you know a little bit about country because your first big job was in Texas as a beat writer for the Rangers, and you got a little lesson about country music on your first day on the beat.
Yeah, before that, just to tell you, until 2 years ago, I thought Molly Hatchet was a woman. Okay, so that just shows you how little I know about music. But yes, in spring training when the Rangers were there, Dickie was there. Charlie Pride used to work out. Is this what you're talking about?
No, but this is a great story
Charlie
too.
Pride used to work out with the Rangers every spring. A great, country singer, and I'm covering the team that he's working out on. What other one are you talking about?
Well, I was talking about the one where they told you who the greatest country star is of all time at the newspaper desk.
Well, I didn't know any better, so I just said, well, Kenny Rogers is the greatest ever. And all my friends, and I thought it was a great choice. And Randy Galloway, Dickie remembers him, comes up to me and goes, Timmy, if you're going to live in Texas, you got to know there's only one great country western star, and that's Willie Nelson. So that was the lesson I learned. The other lesson I learned moving from Maryland to Texas in 1982, I walked into the Dallas Morning News office for the first time, having lived in Maryland, never been to Texas in my life. I walk in and Harless Wade, what a perfect name for an old-time Texas writer, looks at me and he goes, you must be the new guy. And I said, yes, I am. He said, you are the smallest goddamn Yankee I have ever seen in my life. I've been there for 5 minutes, and he attacks me for being a Yankee and being 4 feet tall. Like, welcome to the newspaper, Tim.
And one of my favorite stories also from that same weekend in spring training was I interviewed Charlie Manuel, who was roommates with Charlie Pride in the minor leagues. How crazy is that? And
Charlie Manuel told me, he says he would have this guitar and he'd be pulling it out and he'd be playing it, and he would look at Charlie Manuel and he'd say, I'm going to be a country star one day. And what would you say to your buddies in that? Yeah, sure, okay. Yeah, you keep playing that guitar, and then he becomes Charlie Pride, for goodness sake. That is the perfect meeting of baseball and country music. That really does go hand in hand. And I saw, speaking of, a Tug McGraw jersey. Where's my Tug McGraw jersey? Oh, there it is, right in the front here, which, I mean, is the most beautiful baseball father-son, country music story ever. Tug McGraw wanted to be a country star. Tim McGraw wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. They lived each other's lives. Pretty cool.
And every St. Patrick's Day in Clearwater, when Tug McGraw played for the Phillies, after the workout was over, the game was over, he would go to every Irish bar, walk there on the way back to his apartment, have a beer at the Irish bar because he was Tug McGraw. And by the way, I was at the game when Garth Brooks entered the game as a pinch runner for the San Diego Padres. Garth Brooks, he got picked off at first base by about 5 feet as a pinch runner. And the umpire, it's a spring training game, the umpire called him safe. So the umpire, I think it was Charlie Relaford, not important, said, my wife loves Garth Brooks. If I had gone home and told her that I just called him out at first base, she would have never spoken to me again. So country, western, and baseball, country music and baseball.
That was not a bit.
Go together.
You saw it.
Sorry.
That was not a bit.
That was a Freudian slip. I don't know anything about music. I told you that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we're giving away Chris Stapleton tickets as a part of our raffle there. I won't ask you to sing any songs, but I will say on the podcast, every once in a while, Dad'll throw out, if there's a player that maybe has a name, Joe Adele comes to mind. He then rattled off like 3 or 4 Rolling in the Deep Adele song references that had everybody on the podcast surprised, which was really, really neat.
Right. Well, that's what Google is for dopes like me to try to look like they're smart when I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Speaking of the podcast, we call anybody who listens to the show part of our family. We end every show with thanks for listening or watching, and thank you again for being a part of our family. And we have quite a few members of the family who have showed up today. Most notably, one of our favorites, John Woodward, is here. Now, you might not know that name. We know it well.
John, raise your hand, please. John Woodward.
So he drove all the way from Long Island just to be here today because he wanted to be a part of our show today, and he is absolutely a part of our family. And a big part of, when starting a podcast, the hardest thing we had to overcome was not an audience. You've got a Hall of Fame baseball writer who's committed his whole life to telling stories about the game. That was easy. One tweet and we got a bunch of subscribers. The hardest thing was teaching my dad on how to message our listeners back. That only took about a year to figure out, but we got it. And now anybody can message us on our website. It's back on that QR code on that baseball card of yours. And John Woodward is one of those. Ask us questions, share things with us. And that's where we want to open it up right now for a couple questions from you. So Joel in the beautiful blue polo right there is going to be walking around with a microphone. So if you have a question you want to ask the podcast, Tim Kurkjian, John Woodward is going to open us up first, which I appreciate. John, what do you got?
I will start that. Thank you. So firstly, Tim, I need to tell you that I actually saw Nickelback in concert with 50 Cent. It only cost me 45 cents to see them.
Right. So. He saw Nickelback in concert with 50 Cent. So it's a 45-cent concert.
50 Cent, who had the worst first ball performance I think I've ever seen. Am I right about that? Was that awful or what? 50 Cent, please, throw a baseball properly or don't attempt to throw out the first pitch.
So I have a 2-part question for you, but first I just want to thank you. You're so responsive and so respectful when I ask you questions, sometimes, no pun intended, out of left field with some of my questions, but just
speak up, John. I can't hear you.
A little closer to your mouth.
Okay. Is it in? You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was just saying how respectful you are and how responsive you are when I send some emails to you, so I appreciate that. My 2-part question is, what is your first memory of a baseball game? And secondly, what is your favorite memory of a baseball game? Maybe the same.
First memory of a baseball game, favorite memory.
My father grew up in Watertown, Mass, and every year he would take us to see his mother in Watertown, and we would go to a Red Sox game. So I know I went to Griffith Stadium and RFK Stadium, but my first memory was going to Fenway Park, and in the second inning of a game against the Tigers, Felix Mantilla hit a home run, and it was like burned into my head that like Felix Mantilla for years was my favorite player because he's the first guy I can remember actually going to a game, and I was like 5 years old. But the seminal moment for me was in 1965. We just gotten a color TV for the first time in our lives. Our young people have no comprehension of what that means. So the first show that we watch on our new color TV is the 1965 All-Star Game. And Willie Mays, the greatest player I have ever seen, and I believe after Babe Ruth is the greatest player ever. In living color, he hits a home run to lead off the 1965 All-Star Game. Now, I was hopelessly addicted by that time, and I was only 9 years old. But that put me over the top that, oh my gosh, I'm watching this incredible player in living color, and he hit a home run to start the All-Star Game. Those were two early memories.
One of the things that I wasn't very good at was playing Major League Baseball. One of the things that I'm really good at is sweating. Even now, when I'm not playing, I need hydration. I need to make sure it's convenient. That's why I choose Quince.
Yep, Quince electrolyte stick packs to the rescue, Kratz. They taste great, and the zero sugar options are stevia-free. They're keto approved, naturally sweetened with fermented rice, and like everything Quince does, they're thoughtfully made and priced well at $20 for 30 servings. They're less than half of the leading brand. Give your body what it really needs to stay hydrated. Go to quince.com/foul for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/FOUL for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/foul. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
But in 1995, on the day that Emily was born, the Cal Ripken passing Lou Gehrig story is the most powerful moment that I've ever spent in a major league ballpark. And I've seen every World Series game since '81, every All-Star game since '81. I've been to places and things that no one should be this lucky to see. But that night was different. It was about loyalty and commitment and neighborhood and discipline. It was way more than a baseball story. So before that game, Bob Elliott, another Hall of Fame baseball writer. He's from Toronto. He didn't know Ripken very well, and he just kind of parachuted in for the record-breaking game. And he looks at me before the game, and he goes, Tim, I don't get it. I don't feel it. I don't see it. I don't understand it. What is so important about this? So Ripken breaks the record in the fifth inning. The game's now official. They drop 2-1, 3-1 down that amazing warehouse, and Ripken takes a 22-minute tour of that ballpark, tapping his heart, pointing at people in the stands. And I'm looking around, and there are women, men, and children weeping throughout the ballpark. And when it was all over, Bob Elliott, my Toronto baseball writer friend, came up to me with tears in his eyes, and he said, "Okay, I get it." That's how important that night was. And it's really important to note that night helped save baseball after the horrible 94-95 strike. And I'm not going to talk about next year's strike unless you ask a question, but we don't have a Cal Ripken savior. He started the process of healing the game with that night. I could tell you 100 different stories about that night and Cal Ripken. It was unforgettable.
And we always say that's the most maybe unbreakable record in sports for two reasons. One, our players just don't play like that anymore. And two, that would equal about 64 pitch clock violations. And we can't have that. If you have a 22-minute, you can't do that in the middle of the game these days.
Totally agree.
All right, next question from our audience. Who has one? We have a microphone popping around. This is what our show is all about. Hearing from you, hearing from members of the family.
Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. Speaking of 1995, one of my favorite pitchers that I loved watching was Greg Maddux. And do you have a Greg Maddux story? And do you think there could be pitchers like Greg Maddux again? Because he would throw an 89 pitch complete game, and it was just amazing. And he would place the ball, and he wasn't a big guy, so I just loved watching him pitch. And my follow-up question is, what is your favorite sitcom from this 1960s?
So, Greg Maddux story and favorite sitcom from the 1960s. Well, we've had a lot of Greg Maddux stories on the show, so it's kind of hard to pick one.
All right. Greg Maddux is the greatest control pitcher of all time. He's one of the 5 greatest pitchers of all time. He had 999 walks with 3 starts to go in his major league career, threw well over 5,000 innings. So he's walking one guy every 5 innings. Greatest control pitcher ever. But he didn't walk anybody the last 3 starts of his career, because there's no way in hell, Dickie, that he was going to walk 1,000 guys in his career. That was Greg Maddux for you. But the only story you need to know is that Leo Mazzoni, the pitching coach, went to the mound to talk to Greg Maddux in a really difficult spot in a playoff game. And Leo comes out and says, Bobby wants me to take you out. And Leo said, and Bobby and Greg Maddux says, no, I'm not coming out of this game. The next batter is going to foul out on the first pitch to Chipper at third base. I promise you, first pitch, he's going to foul out to Chipper Jones to end the inning. And the first pitch, the guy hit a pop-up to Chipper Jones to end the inning. And then they gave Maddux a hard time after the game because Chipper was in fair territory by 2 inches. And they said to Maddux, you were wrong. He didn't foul out to him. That's who Greg Maddux was. He was an absolute magician out there, an absolute robot out there. And if anyone ever tells me again that Greg Maddux couldn't pitch today, I'm going to scream out loud. He would be even better today because he would recognize, I see what that guy's trying to do, hit the ball out of the ballpark. I'm just going to throw it underneath his bat or above the barrel. And years ago, in one of my favorite things ever, you have to Google this, you've probably seen it, Chris Bryant in his prime is taking batting practice, and Greg Maddux is disguised as the cameraman shooting this batting practice for Chris Bryant. So the batting practice pitcher pretends to be injured and says, I gotta go. So Maddux, no one knows it's Greg Maddux, puts down his camera and says, all right, I'll throw batting practice. And he throws to Chris Bryant. And Chris Bryant hit the ball, but he didn't hit the ball very hard at all because Greg Maddux knew if I throw it here, he can't hit it. And finally, Chris Bryant, excuse my French, said, boy, the cameraman's got pretty good shit. And it was Greg Maddux at age 52 throwing batting practice. There are 1,000 more Greg Maddux stories. All right, on to the sitcoms. We'll keep this short, all right? Now, I've asked at least 200 people in my life. This is how pathetic a life I live. What is your favorite sitcom of all time? And I promise you, I've gotten 100 different answers. But the top 3 of all time, I'll do it. Number 3 is The Dick Van Dyke Show. Number 2 is All in the Family. And the greatest sitcom of all time is Get Smart. Now, I always tell people, look, this is very subjective. It's not. Get Smart is the greatest sitcom of all time. I've seen every single episode. I can recite every line from every episode. And when we went to Cooperstown one year, Jeffrey, sitting in the back seat, put the DVDs in and watched the entire history of Get Smart.
Well, my family, mom, dad, brother, sister, we would all go every year to Cooperstown. Well, the one year that mom and my sister bowed out was Cal Ripken Jr. and Tony Gwynn's induction, the biggest in history. So we get in the minivan, and I say, Dad, I'll sit up front with you and we'll drive together. And he goes, no, I have something for you. He pulls out his Get Smart DVD box set and says, I want you to watch this. And I say, well, Dad, it's kind of a father-son thing. You know, we can sit and talk on the ride. He goes, trust me, sharing this with you is really special to me. And he's driving the little pop-down TV is in the back, and he can see every scene. And he would look at me and he goes, 99's about to pull a gun out of her waistband, right? Or he'd whisper me and say, he would say the line before Maxwell Smart said it. And so that was kind of one of the first stories we told on our podcast, because we share the love of so much together, whether it's baseball or shows or family. And I know we've got a lot of father-sons out here today, which means a lot. Who is with their dad or brought their dad? Very special. Thank you so much for bringing your dads here today, or bringing your sons here today. That's very, very special.
One last thing on sitcoms. Buck Showalter knows every Andy Griffith show by episode number. Citizen's Arrest is number 113. So it's incredible how much he knows. So Buck, who knows more about baseball than anyone I've ever met, he says to me, he always used to ask me, Tim, have you ever noticed? So one day he calls me to say, Tim, have you ever noticed that everyone on the Andy Griffith show is single? Andy, Barney, Goober, Gomer, they're all single except for Otis the drunk, and he's drunk all the time. I never considered that. So go ahead.
So beautiful. All right, Joel, do we have another question from the audience? I see a hand up right there, and then we'll come right over here after that.
All right, so I know you said you wouldn't answer a question about the strike next year unless you were asked it. So I have a question about the proposed MLB salary cap, and why do you think there's such a contentious back and forth between the MLB and the MLBPA about it?
Well, there goes the fun part of the show, because now... Thanks a lot for that. All right, it's a great question, and the owners are dead set on having a salary cap, and they think it's going to solve all the problems in baseball today. My first question is, how many problems do we really have in baseball today? Did you watch the World Series? Did you watch October? It was great. The WBC was tremendous. This has been a fascinating baseball season. We have more stars, young stars, than I've ever seen before. And now we're going to shut down the game on December the 1st, in part because we have to get a salary cap. The union is not going to accept a salary cap, and therefore there's a chance we won't have baseball next year. So I am deeply, deeply concerned about this. I covered the 81 strike, and it was all about the salary cap, and that was 45 years ago. So I'm just praying and hoping that the two sides recognize how healthy the game is right now, how much money is out there to be lost by the players and the owners. So I'm just praying that somehow, some way, cooler heads prevail and we don't have a work stoppage. But at this moment, I think we're headed that way, and that is really bad news.
All right, well, also, Wade Phillips looks like a guy on the bottle of barbecue sauce.
I didn't hear the question.
I'm sorry. Say it again.
I said, also, Wade Phillips looks like the guy on a bottle of barbecue sauce.
All right, I do the Dan Le Batard show every once in a while. And they have a looks like game on there that is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. And every time I go on, they ask me all these stupid look like things, and I laugh uncontrollably because it's really, really funny. And here I am, if I may. I've been honored by the Hall of Fame for baseball writing. And more people ask me about the looks like show on the stupid Le Batard show than anything else about my career. Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, looks like the lone French fry in a bag of onion rings. That's what I get asked about on the air every time I go on. So we get the strike, and then we get Le Batard. Can't get any further apart than those two.
Thanks for. I didn't have a transition out of the strike, so I really appreciate the question. Next one, what do you got?
Okay, so a couple things. I went with Mark. We went to the Home Run Derby, which was amazing, and I think Philadelphia was the star of that, is my opinion. And then we went to the All-Star game, and Mark, who's a big baseball fan, practically fell asleep. And it reflects the imbalance between pitching and hitting in baseball now. And so I guess this, and then I have a follow-up question too. So the question is, how do you correct the imbalance where pitching has gotten so good, at least with velocity, and they bring these people in and they just fire for a couple innings? How do you correct that imbalance? And then I have a question related to the Phillies and their approach, if I could ask that.
All right, the question is, the game we played today really is about what they call 3 true outcomes: home runs, walks, and strikeouts. There were 29 strikeouts in the All-Star game. 29. By far the most in any 9-inning All-Star game. And these are the best hitters on the planet. It's proving again, when our best pitchers today locate with this ridiculous stuff that they have, our hitters have no chance to get a hit. When Jacob Mizorowski is throwing 105 miles an hour with 3 secondary pitches that are way above average, you have no chance to get a hit against him. And that is a really unhealthy situation. But I'm sorry, I blame the industry for this. They have convinced Joey Gallo, Adam Dunn, and Kyle Schwarber to some degree that it's okay to hit 198, as Kyle Schwarber did a few years ago and had a really good year. It's okay to strike out 225 times as long as you hit the ball out of the ballpark. But this is not healthy for the game. Look, we don't need to go back to the days of Wee Willie Keeler, who looked like me and just beat the ball into the ground and ran to first base. We need people that can hit the ball out of the ballpark. It's really important. But when we're striking out 18 times per game on average, I'm sorry, that's too many. Every year now, we will have more individual hitters striking out 100 times in a season than there was from 1900 to 1963 combined. That's where the strikeout rate is right now. 15 different hitters had 100 strikeouts at the All-Star break. Joe DiMaggio never struck out 40 times in a season. Luis Arraez has struck out like 14 times all year. And there are guys who are almost at 200. This is the industry's fault. And the only way to fix it is to try to go back to, let's put a ball in play. Let's not strike out all the time. Let's not think that the only way to win the game is to hit a homer. The Brewers, as I was telling you guys, they're 5th in the league in runs scored, and they're last in the league in home runs, and they have the best record in baseball. They found another way to play the game. Put it in play. Bunt a guy over. Hit a ground ball to the right side. Take a walk. Steal a base. That's what we need to get back to, but it's going to be a very slow process. And in the meantime, we're going to see 1 million more strikeouts.
Before we get to your second part, and I want to get there, we do have a lot of Phillies fans in the area because we are in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Repeat for us the Luis Arraez strikeout number you had on the podcast the other day. So when it comes to, additions at the deadline, listen, nobody's more. Somebody once said this to me after I moved to Philadelphia. Now, I grew up in Maryland, so I knew Philly fans well. I'd go up with my dad and watch National League games before the Nationals would come so we could see the National League teams. But somebody told me my first week in Philadelphia, they said, nobody loves baseball more than Phillies fans. And nobody hates the Phillies more than Phillies fans. Just saying that they are the most critical and they care so much about their team. So Luis Arraez, though, had a 2-strikeout game towards the beginning of the season. Am I getting this right, Dad?
Yeah, he struck out twice in a game for the first time since
2024, I think it was.
2024. And during that time, James Wood of the Nationals had 145 multiple strikeout games, and Luis Ariz had 1. Now again, James Wood is a great player. He's 6'7", and he swings as hard as he can because that's what they told him to do. And a little bit off the subject here, James Wood has now faced more different pitchers at age 23 now than Ted Williams faced in his entire career. Now think about that for a second. How is that possible? But what it means is teams are throwing 6, 7, 8 pitchers per game, sometimes 1 inning at a time, and tell them, just go in there and throw as hard as you can. Whereas when Ted Williams played, most guys went 9 innings, and since there were fewer teams, the guy you just saw, you're going to see 2 weeks later when they come to your town. So you can look at it any way that you like, but right now, it's not that the game is broken, but I would like to see a return to the value of the starting pitcher. We no longer value him. We no longer leave him in to pitch a complete game. When we took Dickie Knowles out in the 7th inning of a game when he was dealing, he would look at the manager and said, I'm not coming out of this game. Now guys are looking in the dugout after 5 innings saying, you can come get me now. This is the difference. The industry has created this, and I just hope we start to eventually get back to recognizing the starting pitcher is really important. Look, I'm almost 70. I grew up watching Bob Gibson face Denny McLain in Game 1 of the 1968 World Series. I watched Jim Palmer pitch against Sandy Koufax in the 66 World Series. That was really important. That was the game, and we've kind of lost that now, and I find that to be a shame.
Okay, so the second part of my question is to bring it back to the Phillies, and their approach in August has changed tremendously, and it sounds like it's time to Luis Ariz and maybe the meeting with Don Mattingly. I know you could quote the stats a lot better than I can, but my question is sustainability. In your experience, having seen this game for a long time, we all want to be optimistic that this approach will carry over. Do you see a team able to flip the script like that in the middle of a season?
Look, Luis Ariz changed the Padres when he went there a couple years ago. I was with the Padres. He showed up and he swung and hit the ball really hard all the time. Never swung and missed, put the ball in play all the time. And a bunch of the Padres told me he's showing us a different approach, a different way to hit in the big leagues. I think the same thing is happening to the Phillies. But this thought that Luis Ariz is going to come in and suddenly Kyle Schwarber isn't going to strike out anymore, or Bryce Harper is going to stop swinging as hard as he can, which is what makes him Bryce Harper. I don't think that's going to happen. It's going to be a slow movement towards recognizing what this guy's doing might help us win more games, and in a critical situation, I have to hit a ground ball to the second baseman here. But I have to repeat one more time, when these great pitchers are locating with this ridiculous stuff, it's just not that easy to get a bunt down or hit a ground ball to the second baseman. The stuff is overpowering. This is the hardest hitting environment in baseball history.
All right, Tim, got 2 questions for you. First one, can you do as good an impression of Scott Van Pelt as he does of you?
Can you do a Scott Van Pelt impression?
All right, I'm going to say this again. I've been honored by the Hall of Fame, and the 2 questions I get most are the Looks Like show on the Levitard and the long ew that Scott Van Pelt does on the air. This is what I'm known for. I'm 70 years old, and people know me more because I crack up on the air. And by the way, I'm not apologizing for having a good, healthy laugh. The point is, Scott Van Pelt is one of the funniest people in the world. He can do every dialect, he can do every accent, and we both grew up in Maryland. And the long ew that they say in Baltimore, Kiko Garcia, the first time he said that on the air, he did it, and I just laughed out loud. That was 20 years ago, and we're still doing the same thing. I was in a grocery store not too long ago, And this guy came up to me, tackled me in the frozen food aisle, doesn't even say hello. He goes, please ask Scott Van Pelt who the World Cup female soccer goalie is for the United States. And the answer is
Hope Solo.
Hope Solo. So that's the question I asked on live TV to Scott Van Pelt. And there we are, two grown men just laughing like complete idiots. So thank you so much for embarrassing me about the looks like game and Scott Van Pelt. I'm going to say it one more time. We don't laugh enough in our country anymore. You guys know this. We certainly don't laugh enough in baseball anymore. So if there's a good hearty chuckle in it, count me in, no matter how stupid I might look.
Imagine if you were from Baltimore and you were a Phillies fan. You'd say, who we got tonight, Luzardo or Nola?
I was in line at a sandwich store. This is a couple years ago. Guy orders a sandwich, and the lady says, what kind of cheese would you like on it? And I'm standing behind the guy. I haven't made eye contact. He just turns around and looks at me and goes, provolone, and looks back. And that was it. That's how I met him, over the long O of provolone. Who does that?
Okay, hopefully this will keep the comedy going or the laughs. Your favorite verifiable Ricky Henderson story?
Ooh, that's a good question.
My favorite verifiable Ricky Henderson story. Well, there's one that's apocryphal, but I'm going to tell it anyway. Ricky used to play with John Olerud, who had a helmet on his head because he had a brain aneurysm in college. So for his entire career, he wore a helmet in the field just in case. So Ricky plays with John Olerud in New York, and then Olerud goes to the Mariners, and so does Ricky later. And they're standing in the outfield during batting practice, and Ricky looks at John Olerud and says, you know, when I was in New York, I used to play with a guy who used to wear a helmet in the field. And Olerud goes, Ricky, that was me. Well, unfortunately, that's not a true story, but this is. See, that's why. As far as I'm concerned, it's true. With Ricky, anything is possible. But Ricky loved to tip his cap more than anyone. And let's be clear, Ricky's one of the 15 greatest players of all time. He's the greatest base stealer ever. He's the greatest leadoff hitter ever. And he was a magical little man. But he loved to tip his cap. So he's in New York one night. He breaks another record. And he gets a standing ovation from the crowd at Citi Field. So he steps off of first base and tips his cap to everyone because that's what Ricky loves to do. But Ricky being Ricky, with him, the stolen base sign is just a simple clap of the hands. So play has been restored now. He looks over at Cookie Rojas, who's the third base coach for the Mets, who starts to clap his hands to tell Ricky it's time to steal, and Ricky tips his cap to the third base coach. There are 100 Ricky Henderson stories, but I'm going to be close on this number. Ricky Henderson walked with nobody on base like 762 times. 43% of the Hall of Fame position players didn't walk as many times as Ricky Henderson walked as a leadoff hitter, which means it tells me how smart Ricky Henderson was. He's leading off an inning knowing all I got to do is get on base, then I can steal second and third, as opposed to coming up with runners at second and third and him saying, I got to drive these guys in. When he came up with nobody on base as a leadoff man, he said, I'm going to get on base here, and I'm going to make something happen. Don't ever underestimate what a great player Ricky Henderson was, but he was a character. I played with a guy like that in New York.
Dad, I think this is a good transition here because you brought up the greatest leadoff hitter of all time, but the leadoff position has changed enormously. Right here in Philadelphia, Kyle Schwarber, batting 198 one year. You know, you've got Shohei Ohtani. Pete Alonso for the Orioles batted leadoff the other day. The changing of that position, I imagine you're not loving it, but what do you think? How do you feel? Is it just simply let's get the best guy the most at bats?
Well, that's what all the stat guys think, and it makes an awful lot of sense. If you're Shohei Ohtani and you're the best player in baseball, let's get as many at bats as you can. I totally understand that. I'm just, for the third time, I'm going to tell you, I'm almost 70 years old, and I have a little trouble adjusting. When I grew up, Cesar Tovar and Bert Campaneris, these dinky little shortstops who could really run, they always hit leadoff. By the way, my dad used to take us to the Shoreham Hotel when I was a kid, really young, 8 years old, to get autographs of players who came through Washington. So we're in the hotel one day, and I think I'm going to get an autograph from Bert Campaneris, the shortstop for the A's. So I hand him my book and I say, can you sign this? And the very elegant man says, I'm not a baseball player, but I'll sign your autograph. I took it to my father. It was Harry Belafonte who had signed my book instead of Campaneris, and Harry Belafonte was way more famous than him. So I have Harry Belafonte's autograph thinking it was Bert Campaneris. Jeff, I'm all for getting many guys up as many times as possible, but if you have a really fast guy like Pete Crow Armstrong who can hit the ball out of the ballpark and make everything happen on the bases, I would hit him leadoff, yes.
We're going to take a couple more questions. I'll ask Emily, if you don't mind grabbing our jars for the raffle. We're going to pull those up again. After our event today, we're still going to have we'll also announce our silent auction winner, but we'll still have those hats for sale and those pins for sale. Great game or what, exclusive just for this event, with all the money going right towards our friend Michael Brown and his great family. So as Emily grabs those and we get ready for this great finish for these awesome prizes, any other questions? Joel, did you give the mic up? Did I miss it? Oh, there we go, right in front. Okay.
So when did you know you wanted to be a sports writer? And who was your biggest mentor and what did you learn from him?
I knew I was going to be a sports writer when I was in high school, because when I graduated, I played two sports in high school, but when I graduated, I was 5'2" and 110 pounds and looking really good. So I realized this might be the end of my NBA or MLB aspirations. So I figured, all right, I got to stay in baseball somehow because I have no other interest. So I worked for my school paper. And if you don't know, I went to Walter Johnson High School in Bethesda, Maryland, named after the greatest pitcher of all time. So my first writing assignment was for the school paper called The Pitch. And I did some work for the yearbook, which was called The Windup. So that's where I got my start, and that's when I realized that maybe this is something I can do. But after one especially bad story, I was a terrible writer in high school. After one especially bad story that I wrote, Mr. Klein, one of the gym teachers, came up to me and said, Tim, that might be the worst story I've ever read in the school paper. I hope you're not planning on making this your life's work. And yet, miraculously, I did. As it turns out, my mother was a great writer. The gene was inside of me to figure this out. I just had to bring it out. If you want to be a good free throw shooter, you got to take a lot of free throws. If you want to be a great shortstop like Larry Boa, you got to take a million grounders. If you want to be a good writer, you have to learn how to write. So I just wrote and wrote and wrote. And I think the second question was, who was my mentor type of thing? Well, Dan Shaughnessy, I'm going to use another bad word here in a minute, warning here. Dan Shaughnessy was the baseball writer at the Washington Star right after when I got out of college. He's in the Hall of Fame, honored like I am, and he's my all-time favorite baseball writer. So in 1980, I am covering minor league baseball baseball, and now I'm going to go cover the big leagues as a backup to Dan Shaughnessy. So he takes me on the field in 1980 to meet Earl Weaver, the greatest manager in the game, and for me, one of the 5 greatest managers of all time. So it's 1980. I'm 23 years old. I'm 2 feet tall. I look like I'm 8 years old, and I get introduced by Dan to Earl Weaver. And Dan says, Earl, this is Tim. He's going to be covering some games when I'm away. And Earl Weaver looks at me and goes, you, Tim, and walks away. So I was just about ready to cry. I mean, oh my God. And Dan says, no, Tim, don't worry. That's what Earl says to all the people that he really likes. I said, really likes? He just met me 3 seconds ago. That's impossible. So Dan taught me how to do this, and I will always, and Peter Gammons and others, but Dan Shaughnessy was my mentor in the business. And I ended up having a great relationship with Earl Weaver over the years, even though he F-bombed me the first time I met him. Oh my gosh. Well, I have to tell one more story before I go, okay? Because this is a first, especially with this crowd. When I do these things, and I do them all the time because I just love to meet people who love baseball, I didn't get one Pete Rose question today. This is unbelievable. Pete Rose, no matter where I'm speaking, is always one of the first 5 questions that I get asked. Should he be in the Hall of Fame? Tell us a Pete Rose story, whatever. So I'm going to finish with this Pete Rose story. And again, there's another bad word in it. I'm sorry. So Pete...
before Dad tells this story, when he says that on the podcast, we're a clean podcast, so I write a time marker. So I have a lot of editing to do today because this is curse number 4, and I don't have the times on me, so I'm going to have to watch this episode a couple times before we go.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. This is on the podcast. There's going to be
Thanks.
Unfortunately, there are going to be a lot of bleeps here.
Nothing's funnier than when he does set up a curse word and then doesn't curse. He said, all right, well, we're going to have to bleep this out. But he looked at me and said, are you freaking kidding? And I said, Dad, we're good. We're good. Cleared.
So Pete Rose goes to prison for 4 months at age 51 for tax evasion. He gets out of prison. His son comes to pick him up at the prison where he's been incarcerated for 4 months. The first thing he says to his son is there a batting cage near here? First thing. And his son goes, yeah, there's one right down the street. So the first thing they do when he gets out of prison is they go to the batting cage. Pete goes to the proprietor and says, what's the fastest machine you have here? And the proprietor goes, 85. Dickie, we know 85 is still bringing it. Pete Rose now gets in the cage, and now everyone at the batting cage recognizes the all-time hit king is in the batting cage. So the first pitch comes in, and Pete Rose swings at it. Again, 51 years old, been incarcerated for 4 months. He whistles a line drive right back at the pitching machine. Absolute textbook swing, textbook line drive. He looks at all the assembled people around him, takes his bat, throws it to the ground, and says, some things never change. And then he walks away.
Excellent place, Dad. Today has been amazing. I want to give it... Oh, we got one more? All right, one more question.
So we're here because a lot of us have been affected by ALS. And we know that Major League Baseball does a lot for many different things. How do you think they could improve LG4 Day? What improvements do you think that they could make for Lou Gehrig?
How could they, Major
2nd.
League Baseball, improve Lou Gehrig Day, LG4 night? Which, by the way, Dad, I really felt like in moving our family to Philadelphia in 2022, my wife and I moved about a month after we got married. Her hometown is Las Vegas, and she upped and moved with me to the East Coast for my job to work for 92.5 XTU. My uncle had been diagnosed in 2021, and I had been a part of ALS organizations in Las Vegas, around the DC area. I have to say right off the bat, nobody, and I mean nobody, does Lou Gehrig Day better than the Philadelphia Phillies. It is unbelievable. It'll never be enough. No organization can ever do enough, right? We know that, right? This disease has touched too many, and it continues to grow in numbers that we've never seen before. But the Philadelphia Phillies do an incredible job. I mean, just on an aside, who saw Chase Utley's Hall of Fame induction? Oh my gosh, that was the most beautiful thing. I'm crying tears. I didn't even grow up in Philadelphia, and he's talking about how much Philadelphia means to his family while looking at his kids. But you're right, Major League Baseball as a whole needs to look at the Phillies and what they do on nights like Lou Gehrig Day and all of the games that they do where they honor their alumni and take a lesson. There's more to be done.
And Debbie Nacito's here. Thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you, Debbie.
Phillies.
Debbie of the Philadelphia Phillies.
And with Lou Gehrig.
And if she had nothing to do with her being here, I mean that from the bottom of our heart. They do it better than anybody because we've been to Lou Gehrig Day at many stadiums, and nobody does it better than the Phillies.
And we have to do more with Lou Gehrig Day. We do a really nice job, especially in Philadelphia, but we have to do more than this to bring awareness to this wretched disease. Every player should wear number 4 on Lou Gehrig Day as a tribute, not to just what he went through, but also what a great player that he was. So that would be my suggestion. He's not Jackie Robinson because Jackie Robinson changed the way the game was played. He's the most important player in Major League history, but I think it's okay to have everyone wear number 4 on Lou Gehrig Day, just so we all understand that we have so much more to do to solve this disease. And Jeff and I know all about this, losing my brother. It's just the worst thing ever. So that's what we need to do. And every bit of help, including what we're doing today, is really appreciated. So one more time, thank you so much for coming out today. And God bless you, Michael Brown.
We love you, Michael.